There we go. All right, good evening. My name is Steve Young. I am the Assistant Executive Director here at the Schuylkill County Historical Society. Thank you very much for coming out. I'm really pleased to see almost all the seats are filled. All right, before we get started, if anybody has a cell phone, please put it on mute. We don't want anybody getting interrupted, and then he's gonna have to start over, then we're gonna be here for 5 hours. Okay, a little bit of, a little hot thing, I'm gonna tell you some of the programs that are coming up. On the 8th of June, we have letters from Irving Schwartz from World War II. This gentleman is down from Pine Grove. He's gonna be here talking about letters from soldiers that were mailed to family members down in Pine Grove and the surrounding area down there. It's gonna be really interesting because it gives a different perspective on some of the events that had happened over in during World War II. And that is on June 8th at 6:30, it's right here. Okay? And on June 14th, we will be having a presentation about the crash of the United Airlines Flight 624 that happened up in Mount Carmel. Okay, I don't know if anybody ever remembers that. That's a little bit before my time. But we have two local historians, Stu Richards and Tom Dempsey, will be giving that presentation. That is on June 14th at 6:30. Again, it's right here. So that actually, I'm really excited about that one because I knew nothing about this one.
You're also celebrating Flag Day that day?
We usually post something on Facebook about Flag Day. Yes. And that's what we have right now. We do have other programs that are scheduled in July. So if anybody has access to our website or on Facebook, just tune into that and you'll see the dates, the times, who's giving the presentations and what they are. Okay? You didn't come here to hear me babble. So this is Rick Cantner. He's gonna talk to you all about the railroads and the locomotives that were very significant here in Schuylkill County. So I want everybody to put their hands together for.
Thank you. Anybody not have the handout sheet? It's a fact sheet. Anybody not get this? Anybody else? Ready? Whoop. Where? Oh, there's two there, but I'll give you another one if you want it. There you go. Not a problem. Thank you for inviting me. Lorraine's cousin, David Durbis, called me, a month ago now. We've been talking about this, and I got several phone calls about coming here and doing this. Let me tell you, first of all, thank you. Who I am. My name's Rick Cantner. I live in Schuylkill Haven. I'm actually retired from the railroad. I had 34 years full-time. I was an engineer most of that. 38 years if you add some of the volunteer work we did. I'm also a co-pastor of the church right across the street. So we're your neighbors. You might want to know that. I brought a sign in. This is all the railroads I've worked for over the years. Just little 4 main class ones and a whole bunch of short lines. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask anytime. Interrupt me, let me know. These videos, I make no money off of this. Some of you know who Bruce Cantner was. He showed slides here before. These are his videos. When he passed away, he left me all of his movies. And I got in contact with this guy named John Pachulis, who made fantastic videos. I mean, if you want to see the best videos I ever saw of trains in this area, starting back in the 40s up into like the late 70s, early 80s, this is it. There's 4 volumes of this. These are mine, don't take them home. But on the top of your sheet, I gave you a www. That's his website. And he's just started a series on the history of the Reading and Northern. I have one of those here too. It's up to volume 5 already. Again, I make no money off that. I'm just telling you, if you really want to see some nice videos of this area, that's the best I've ever seen. Now, first of all, I want to answer the question that I was asked to answer, and I hear this a lot. What the heck's going on with all these derailments? Have you heard that? I've been asked probably 10 times in the last month or so. Well, in my humble opinion, nothing's going on. Railroads derail all the time. In my 34 years, I've had quite a few myself, and there's major derailments at least once a week somewhere in this country. And here's why. If you just do the math, in the US, there's 160,000 miles of railroad track. There's 25,000 locomotives, 1.6 million cars, and every day, about 6 to 10,000 trains run across America. Just do the math. That's 180,000 trains a month in America. Amtrak runs about 300. They haul about 500,000 cars a day. That's 1.4 trillion tons a year, 4 billion tons a day. Just do the math. It's going to happen. With that many trains and that many cars, every year, U.S. railroads haul about 2.1 million cars of chemicals. That's almost 5,700 chemical cars a day. And that's every chemical you can imagine: gasoline, propane, chlorine, ammonia, everything, any chemical there is comes by rail. I like to say cars collide, ships sink, planes crash, and trains derail. It just happens. These massive machines run. Every now and then something goes wrong. I was just talking to a friend of mine who was flying. She wasn't too happy about it. And I said, I wouldn't worry about it. Most of them make it. And they do. Most trains make it. You only hear about the ones that crash. Now, that train that just derailed recently in Palestine, Ohio, that was a Norfolk Southern train. It had 150 cars. That was almost 2 miles long. It was going 47 miles an hour. When it derailed, it had, let me see here, 38 cars derailed. 11 of those were carrying vinyl chloride, which is used to make plastic. That's poisonous. It's flammable. That was a massive wreck, a serious wreck. It contaminated a huge area. Because that happened, and that happens maybe once a year or something like that, but now the news media wakes up to that. Now every time there's a derailment, you're going to hear about it. So it sounds like there's a lot more trains wrecking, but there isn't. It's just how it is. So you're going to hear more about trains, but it's not really happening. In fact, since 2019, train derailments are down by 30%. That's probably because they're running less of them. They're making them longer and longer all the time. Now, along with that, in my experience, all the years I ran trains, we ran mostly on Norfolk Southern's tracks. And for most of my career, their tracks were wonderful. They had some of the best railroad track I ever ran on, except for the last couple of years. They started letting things go. What's happening is, again, every company has the right to make a profit, and they're cutting corners, I believe. And that may be involved in this wreck, I don't know. They're not doing all the inspections they used to do. They're hurrying trains out of the yard. They're cutting corners. Fuel prices hurt the railroad tremendously. And you know how fuel prices are. A typical locomotive has a 5,000-gallon fuel tank. You know what it costs to fill something like that? So they're running much longer trains, and they're letting some of the maintenance go. I think when finally the report comes out what happened here, you're going to see some of all of that involved. But there aren't more derailments. It's just you're hearing about them. Now, let's talk about the railroads a bit, and we'll get to the local railroads here in a minute. But Schuylkill County is rich, as you know, in railroad history. This is a railroad county. Now, today, the Reading and Northern is not near as busy as the Reading Railroad was, say, 40, 50 years ago. But still, this is a railroad county. Most families here, you probably have somebody in your family who worked for the railroad. Most of you do, just because of where you live. My grandfather, Charles Henry Cantner, was an engineer on the Reading Railroad. He ran steam freight trains out of St. Clair down to Port Richmond for years and years and years. Then towards the end of his life, he became a passenger engineer. He died right before I was born. Never met him, but I read a bit about him. My father, Bright Cantner, was given a job over here at the St. Clair shops. Now, because my dad was nothing like me, he was a skinny little guy. He got the job where they bring the steam engines in, they drop the fire, drop the ashes. He crawled in through the box, through the fire doors with a hose and a brush and clean the inside of the steam engines out. He told me he got that dirty, he couldn't get the dirt off. It was on him for years after that job. Anyway, that's what he was. The Reading Railroad, which was the big railroad here in the area many years ago, was the first one to use. You ever see those cross spokes that say stop, look, and listen? They invented that. That's a Reading Railroad invention. At one time in 1871, the Philadelphia and Reading, which was a precursor to the Reading Railroad, was the largest corporation in the world. That's why, for example, it's on a monopoly board, the Reading Railroad, because it was so big, it was so rich at one time. It was the largest corporation on earth. Around 1900, St. Clair Yard, right over here where the industrial park is now, was the largest railroad yard in the world, right around 1900. Just a few miles away from here. It was a busy, busy coal and everything coming in and out of there. The Philadelphia and Reading's Port Richmond Terminal, which is down in Philadelphia, it was, when it was built, was the largest railroad marine terminal privately owned by a railroad in the world. And my granddad ran trains down there, coal trains and all kinds of stuff for many, many years down to Port Richmond in Philadelphia. The St. Nick Breaker up in Monomoy City, at one time, was the largest coal breaker in the world. What did it have here? 1931. That was the largest. It's not being used anymore, but you can still see it's enormous up there. I have an old Pottsville Republican from 1919, and it says that there are 200 passenger trains a week coming in and out of Pottsville over here. Can you imagine that? 200 a week in and out of Pottsville. This was a busy place. The railroads were huge around here. Pottsville, like this area, Pottsville had 4 major railroads in town. You had the Reading Railroad, you had the Pennsylvania Railroad, you had the Lehigh Valley Railroad, came in the west end up there, and you had the trolley line, the People's Railway. Busy, busy place. Pennsylvania, as you probably know, is the world's largest anthracite producer. And this county is the largest anthracite county in Pennsylvania. I tried to get some figures on this, of how many billions of tons in about 150 years, how much coal did the Reading Railroad haul? And I was on many websites. It looks like it was several billions of tons of coal came out of here and went down the valley to Philadelphia and other places. It's unbelievable. Today, it's only a shadow what that used to be. But back in the day, it was enormous.
Could I interrupt?
Certainly.
You have this People's Railroad, Raleigh.
Yeah.
I thought that ran in through Seltzer City, down over the hill, and Briar City, and over in the Minersville, and up over into Duncott to a breaker or a colliery.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Was the trolley lines here in Pottsville?
That went to the Lido colliery.
Okay. Oh, I didn't see you back there.
From out,
Yeah.
by Sheets and Dunkin' Donuts going into 12th Street.
Is that the same one that went down to Origsburg? Yeah.
Well, no, people just went from out by Dunkin' Donuts
Okay.
and Sheets into about 12th Street.
Well, that makes 5 railroads
And
then.
it was a trolley, and then it was owned by the Lehigh Valley, then it was owned
Okay.
last by the
And I know the trolleys went from like Mount Carmel all the way down to Origsburg and everywhere in between back in the day. Yeah. Okay. Wasn't aware of that. Thanks for correcting me. Question. Talking about the railroads. What would happen if the railroads shut down today? Totally shut down. No, England, you got that right. What would happen? Now, of course, the railroads aren't, over my career, many times they tried to go on strike. Congress says no, and I get that. Think what would happen. I got some stats here. And by the way, before I get there, I left something out. I hired out back in the 80s, the Blue Mountain and Reading Railroad was just starting up. This man here who was overdressed, he and I were there back in those days. My buddy Bill, he works for the railroad. They were just starting out, and I started volunteering for them as a brakeman, like he does. He's been a brakeman, he's been a conductor, now he's working for the Lehigh Gorge over in Jim Thorpe. He's been there all those years. But then I worked there 3 years off and on. Then I went to Amtrak out of New York City, which was a crazy thing to do, but we wanted so bad to get a job on the railroad. My buddy and I took a train to New York City in 86, December of 86. I got hired by Amtrak. I was a conductor. I worked for Amtrak for about a year. Then they laid me off December 12th. December 15th, Conrail hired me. I loved Conrail. I was hired out of Allentown. And with Amtrak, I worked New York to Baltimore, to Washington, to New Haven, to Harrisburg. With Conrail, I worked out of Allentown. I was everywhere. Not that I'm bragging, but I went all the way down to New Jersey, what they call Oak Island Yard, which is Newark, South Kearney and North Bergen, all the way to Harrisburg and Enola and all over the place. I worked for Conrail for, I think, almost 5 years, and then they laid me off. That happens a lot in the railroad. At that time, the Reading and Northern, which replaced the Blue Mountain and Reading, was just starting in my backyard over Cressona. So I went over there and got hired. And I worked there from 92 to 2000. I loved it. For the Reading and Northern, I ran all through this county, everywhere it goes, Tamaqua, Pottsville, Hazleton, Jim Thorpe, Good Spring, all those places. It was a good job. I loved it. But then in 2000, I hired on Canadian Pacific. They were hiring engineers, and I wanted to go back to the big railroads. And I worked for CP Rail is the biggest, second biggest railroad in Canada. But they run all through the Northeast US. And I got a great job out of Allentown working for CP Rail. I was there almost 18 years. I worked every place they went, in the north to Binghamton, to Saratoga, New York, to Albany, to Philly, to Camden, to Harrisburg, to all over. Loved CP Rail, and a couple of short lines in between. But in the last 4 years of my career, you might have heard this, Norfolk Southern bought out the line I worked on for CP Rail. So all of a sudden, I become a Norfolk Southern. Here's a picture of me on a Reading and Northern way, way back. I wasn't always this dumpy looking. That was me back in the Reading and Northern. Let's see if I know how to use this thing. Apparently not. I've never used one of these. Come on, come on, come on. All right. These are mixed up, but this is a picture of me on CP Rail. This is over at Packerton Junction. We were sitting there, CP Rail. Can I do this? No. Oh, come on. Come on. Some guys make this look easy. Come on. Stay. I had the privilege of running the very last Canadian Pacific train out of Binghamton North to Saratoga. That very next day, I became an employee of Norfolk Southern. But that's me up in Saratoga taking a picture of me before the Norfolk Southern takeover. Let's keep going here. I don't want to bore you with too many pictures of me. That's me working Easter Sunday in Binghamton Yard. Railroads run 24/7. You go when they call. So that was me up in Binghamton Yard. Easter Sunday. What else I got here? I don't remember anymore. Delaware and Hudson was another name for the CP Rail. CP Rail, come on. CP Rail controlled the Delaware and Hudson. There's a subsidiary. That's me. Come on. Is there a secret to this? There we go. And of course, I ended up on Norfolk Southern, as they say, fade to black. Of all the railroads I worked for, I loved CP Rail. I hated Norfolk Southern. Maybe it's just my experience, but they were very hard on their employees. They cut our pay by almost a third, and et cetera, et cetera. But I worked there the last 4.5 years of my career. Now, we're talking about these derailments. In fact, I should have been doing this all along here. They happen all the time. But let's get back to our question before I get ahead of myself here. If the railroads stopped running, think about this. The US has the largest and most efficient rail system in the world. Now, Europe has a great rail system. Do you ever see European freight trains? They're 20 cars, 30 cars. America has the most efficient, from the numbers I looked at, railroad system in the world. And railroads are essential to what America does. If the railroad shut down today, we'd be in big trouble. The railroad hauls more freight than trucks and planes and boats and barges combined. Now, you don't see this here in the county because the Reading and Northern is a busy railroad, but it's not near like it was. I was in a barber a while back, and these old guys were saying, boy, you don't see trains anymore. I said, well, if you go down to Reading some night, or go to Harrisburg, that's called the Lebanon Valley, and just sit trackside next to the main line, between like early evening, say 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you'll see train after train after train, 2 miles long, 3 miles long, freight, double stacked. I'll get to that in a second. The railroad, the big railroads are very busy hauling freight. The railroads haul almost everything there is, from glass, stone, cement, wood, steel, everything there is, automobiles. Some facts here. Every day, trains hauled enough grain to give every person on earth 6 loaves of bread. Realize that? I don't know who figures this stuff out, but I got this off several websites. Every day, the railroad hauls enough lumber to build 3 houses a minute for a full year. Do you ever see those big lumber cars the trains haul? Every year, the train hauls enough concrete to build 45 miles of highway every day in the United States. Every day, trains haul over 60% of all power plant coal. Of course, they're going away now, thanks to our president. And almost everything to do with plastics, trains haul that stuff. Anything plastic came by rail at some point in its life. Railroads are the most fuel efficient mode of transportation ever invented. And that's true. Think about this. They're 4 times more efficient than trucks. They put out 75% less pollution than trucks do. I double checked these figures because I didn't believe when I first saw it. But it's true. The railroad can haul 1 ton of freight 480 miles on 1 gallon of fuel. And what they're talking about is on level track. And this is true. You take a train, or a locomotive or a car on absolutely level track, knock off the brakes, you can push that car. I've done that. You can push them. That's how easily they roll. The reason is if the rails are where they should be and the wheels are as they should be, when that steel wheel touches that steel rail, what's the size of a dime? There's almost no friction. And trains then can be so efficient in what they do that they can haul way outdo trucks. If the railroads quit right now, just stopped running, it would take 99 million trucks to haul what the railroads haul. We don't have that many trucks, let alone drivers put in them. Let's back these figures up. In the first week, if the railroad shut down, Yuengling would be in trouble. Alcoa Aluminum, whatever it's called now, Hydro would be in trouble. Rainier Films, what's that called now? Exxon up here, I'm going by the old names, I used to work there. They would all be in big trouble because they get this stuff. And all over the country, these factories would start shutting down in about a week. Manufacturing, the steel industry, the car makers. In 2 weeks, most manufacturing in America would stop. Most coal-fired plants would have to shut down. And there's no way trucks could pick up that slack. We'd be in a world of hurt if that ever happened. The stores would start emptying out. And here's why. Let me get these pictures ahead here. Come on. You wouldn't believe how many times I practice this. I'm messing it up now. Come on. Come on. Get out of there. These are just showing you some of the wrecks that happen all the time. I've got a whole file of these. I'm sorry. I just brought some pictures of wrecks I gathered. This was a nasty wreck on CSX. This freight train took the siding. I think it's down in Maryland. And this Amtrak train was flying along doing about 79, and the guys left the switch open. The Amtrak train came right on top of it. Several people died, took the whole front engine and destroyed it. That was in the news. That you probably heard about. More wrecks. These are out of order. They're not supposed to be. Come on. When I worked for Amtrak, I don't have any pictures of me working for Amtrak, but some pictures I took when I worked for Amtrak. This is out of Harrisburg. Come on. Another wreck. Another wreck. I'll get there. These are all car carriers, auto racks, they call them. There's two decks in there of automobiles. That was you can see the cars hanging out here. That was a very expensive wreck, wherever that was. I don't know.
Wasn't that up in New York?
I don't know. I'd have to look. I have a mark, but I can't tell on here. Let me get to where I wanted to go. What you don't realize, like I mentioned, how the press only covers the wrecks now because they're popular. But there were many wrecks around this county that you probably never heard of. Here's one of them. Back in the day, during the Reading and Northern, when I worked, I didn't do this, but we had a special engine given to us by Conrail. And they had a severe wreck. They crashed into their own train and destroyed 4 engines and a whole bunch of cars. I don't think that ever made the paper. It just wasn't that big of a deal. It was serious to the railroad. No one was seriously hurt, but it was a serious thing. Let me show you some more. Hopefully. What did I just do? Come on. You can tell I worked for the railroad and didn't program computers. All right, here we go. I'm sorry about this. Here was a wreck. Come on. Is anybody better at this than I am? There, that's too big. Just above New Ringgold, I was coming up with a freight train and a Cook's turkey farm truck pulled out right in front of me. I'll say this delicately, when we hit that truck, about 200 turkeys took a collective dump. And there were turkeys running in the woods, and there were turkeys all around. Some of these cages broke open. When the firemen came out to respond to this with their rubber boots, they were slipping and sliding all over the place. And they had to get the hose out. The guy driving this rig was an older fella. He wasn't hurt, but he was very shook up. He pulled out right in front of us. But I don't think you ever heard that in the paper. Wrecks happen all the time. You don't hear about them because there's no hazardous material. There's no fire. No. I don't think so. I'm not sure. They were running all over the woods, I remember. They're out. This is right where that cloister is, you know what I mean? Just north of New Ringgold. There's a crossing there. There's some more here. I meant to get these earlier. This was very early in the Reading and Northern days. This is just north of Ashland. Train laid over and wrecked all over the place. And these are lumber cars, and tons of lumber spilled into the river. We had guys camping out here for like a week so no one would steal all this lumber until they could clean this mess up. Look, I don't think it ever got in the papers. These things happen all the time. Railroads wreck. In the early days of the Reading and Northern, their track was in pretty tough shape some places, but that's one of them. There's more here. This is just south of Tamaqua. See the cars laying all over the place. I'm taking a picture out the front of the engine. Now that one, I don't think that made the paper either. Wrecked cars laid over. They pushed them out of the way. Here's a crane. That crane's got a bad history, but here's a crane where they were trying to fix these cars. And we're going by real slow because you barely fit past down here. But again, just to point out that in this county, there's been many, many train wrecks. Weren't talked about much. Got one or two more here, I think. This just happened. Oh, too big, too big, too big. Is it my fingers or what? This is up around Hometown. Is this Nesquehoning? This just happened, what, like a year ago, not that long ago? Tremont?
Yeah,
Could be.
I may have or may have not been on.
Really? I derailed in Tremont a few times, tied the whole town up. But it happens. It's a Reading and Northern, not that long ago. Yeah, I derailed in Tremont a few times. Like I remember one night we derailed in Tremont and tied the whole town up. And this guy comes out with a big chew in his mouth and a pickup truck. He goes, tell you what, I'll get the chain. I'll pull that train back on for you. I said, no, thanks. We got it. This was Cresona. This is many, many years ago. I forget when we even took that. Rail breaks, train derails. It happens. I got one or two more here. They do, sometimes. That's a picture I took on Amtrak. These are out of order again. This you never heard about, but you certainly could have. That's a loaded car of pentane. Pentane is more flammable than gasoline. This is the road to nowhere. What happened was it split the switch. It's on two different tracks. I didn't do this, but that's my engine. We came down to help derail this, but they were very upset because even a drop of this would have leaked. It would have had to shut down 222 and evacuate houses, etc. It never came to that. But again, did you ever hear about this? No. It's just the ones that make big booms and kill people you hear about. And that's how it should be, I guess. This is right here in Pottsville. Right down below here, coming into Pottsville. Full train came down, derailed. What's that? Under 61, yes, right here, that's 61. You're looking north, you're looking towards Yingling here. They brought the cranes out and had to get cars back on. That wasn't me either, I didn't do that. That's 61, or where the wreck was in Pottsville. Come on. This, just north of Reading is a place called Rickenbach. I was running on a Sunday. We come flying down through 40 miles an hour. This tractor pulled out right in front of us with 3 young children in. They weren't hurt. But as you see, it cut the tractor in half right at the firewall. It's funny, there was a farm down below and Dad came running up. He was all upset. As soon as he saw his kids were all right, now he's furious because that tractor's expensive. The kid apologized. They were a very nice kid. He said, "I'm sorry, mister, I had the radio blast and I didn't hear you blowing the horn, et cetera, et cetera." Another foot or more out and we probably would have killed all three of them. It happens. It just happens. When I went to engineer school, we called it choo-choo-you. They told us very few engineers are going to retire without having at least one fatality and many car wrecks. And that's true. That's been pretty much my career. Let's move on. What I got here? Come on. This, you would know this. That's Darren Gershwin. This is just this side of Tremont. I was the engineer, but he was running. We were teaching him how to run. Nothing he did wrong. But you can't see in the pictures, there were cars piled up. They were pushing trees over, stacked up like bread. Had to cut a road through the woods to get trains in there to clean it up. Again, this stuff doesn't make the papers because it shouldn't have to. That's the same wreck. All right, these are out of order. I apologize for that. This is out in Harrisburg, Enola. You ever see that big bridge that goes across Susquehanna there in Harrisburg? This is just the west side of that. Train coming into the yard, laid right over. I don't think it made the paper. Maybe out there it did. Here's another picture of that. Same wreck. And then, not that long after that, it happened again. Come on, come on. Notice they're running in northern cars. Some of them fell right down in this road. There's a road under that bridge there. It was probably on Harrisburg TV, but I don't think anybody else ever knew about this. It's just one of them things. Train wreck. Come on, go, 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 go. This is up in Canada, but since I work for CP Rail, I just threw it in there. I'm sure they jumped out of the seat in a hurry. Anyway, let's get to where I'm going. Again, that's me on Conrail. That's taken down in Abrams Yard. These were supposed to be first. This was a CP Rail wreck up in Bloomsburg, right along the Susquehanna. Train pilot. There actually were cars in the river which they pulled out. This is off Rail Stream. But again, that never made, I don't think it made the news around here. That was a pretty serious wreck for a long time. It had a big mess to clean up. Talking about wrecks. Now, get back to where I'm supposed to be. Some do, yeah, some do, some don't. All depends what's in them. They go down. Here's why I'm telling you that if the railroad shut down, America would be in big trouble. This is a Bruce Kantner photograph, by the way. Wonderful guy. He had some many shots. This is a coal train up in Frackville. Let me show you some more of these. Coal. There we go. That's a Norfolk Southern. I hate this thing. Some of you buffs might know where this is. I don't. Too big, too big. But note the coal cars. One loaded coal car, a modern coal car, could hold about 130 tons, 120 tons. I did the math. That's 5 big tractor trailers for one car. Here's 2 locomotives. There's 2 guys in the cab hauling maybe 100, 120, 130, 150 hoppers. That would be several hundred trucks on the road. That's what a train can do. If these trains weren't running, if truckers had to do that, there wouldn't be enough trucks. There wouldn't be enough drivers. It's not possible. A coal train with 3 engines and 2 cars can hold about 150 of these. That's about 800 some trucks. And one more here. Actually. Oh boy. Please bear with me. I never used a smart TV before. It didn't seem all that smart to me. This is another Bruce Kantner photo of a coal train going. This is right where Burger King is now. Just above Burger King, loaded coal cars. This is over in Cressona, another Bruce Kantner photo. They're hauling cars north. I guess that's rough coal to be taken to the breaker to be processed. But it's the idea. Imagine if trucks had to try to haul all that coal. It wouldn't happen. No. Come on. That's St. Clair. This is right where that gas station is now, when you go into St. Clair off 61. I gave a note to Cole. Bruce Cantner photograph. Thank you, Bruce. Another Frackville train of empties, coal cars. Coal was huge here. I'd planned these to be in order, but they're not. Come on. Now, you've seen these. In fact, if you go down way along the main line in Reading or Harrisburg, or you'll see miles of these at night. They're running probably right now. They're called double stacks. I noticed here in Pottsville, you ever notice through town these containers? You see containers are like an orange card, they say ZIM on them. You know what that is? That container came from Israel. They're Israeli. Now picture this. Somewhere, somebody ordered something from Israel. Way over in Israel, they loaded one of these containers, put it on a truck. That truck took it to a rail yard. That rail yard took it to the coast where it was loaded on a boat. It came across the ocean in that same container to America somewhere, one of our ports. They unloaded it off that boat, put it on a train, and took it somewhere where some truck picked it up and brought it here to Pottsville. In these containers can be anything from TV sets to cell phones to sneakers to you name it. Everything that is shipped in these containers. I've seen these trains. I run a few of them. Well, they can be 2 miles long with double stacks. You're talking about 500 plus containers. That's 500 trucks it would take to run that one train. Think of it. If the railroad shut down, we'd be in big, big trouble.
Also been proven that those containers also can haul a lot of stolen vehicles.
Oh yeah, yep, they do. And the kids, places where the trains slow down, the kids will jump on there with bolt cutters and open the door and just start throwing boxes out. They don't know what's in those cars, hoping they find something they can get. In fact, when they haul sneakers, we'd haul sneakers, one container would have the left shoe, the other container had the right shoe. So in case they robbed it, they only got one shoe. That's true. That's true. That's very true. Yeah, when I was in engineer school, they told us a double stack train with 2 engines and 100 cars. Each engine's worth about $2 million. And 100 cars loaded with anything from TVs to window cleaner to whoever it was. One loaded 100 car double stack train could be worth about $1 billion. Just one train. That's how America's freight moves, like this. So if the railroads ever shut down, this is why, for example, Congress would never let them. The railroads can't go on strike. It would cripple this nation. It would shut us down in about a week. The railroads are very efficient at what they do. When I used to work trains out of Saratoga coming south, and we'd have these containers. You never had a chance of seeing the end of your train. It was 2 miles plus long. They were just enormous trains. Now, let's get to where's it at? Come on. Oh, that's me on Conrail. These are way out of order. It's down in South Philly. I put them in order, but they don't stay there. That's me on Conrail again, showing off. That's me on the Reading and Northern. And again on the Reading and Northern. Pardon me if I'm going too fast. I don't mean to do that. That's me over in Cressona Yard on the Reading and Northern. Back in the day. Come on. There's still that movie's on here. How do I get to that? All right, it's on the bottom here. Before I end this, and stop boring you to death, let's talk about safety a little bit. I used to give talks. I gave several talks up here in St. Clair High School to the kids. And I put together a movie. Some of you guys know, Mike Cole. When he was in high school, they had a program where I would mentor him. He wanted to be an engineer. He is right now. We put this video together. And just think about some stats here real quick. I got my maps out this week, and I guess there's about 100 to 120 or 30 road crossings in Schuylkill County where the trains cross the tracks. About 100 to 120 if I counted them right. And nationwide, there's 27,000 public road crossings where the roads cross the railroad tracks. There's about 4,000 accidents a year at road crossings, 520 deaths on average. Every 90 minutes, a train hits a car or a pedestrian here in America. Every 90 minutes. Think about it. That's pretty serious. In 2022, there were 274 deaths, 777 injuries. Some dates go back. 1996, there were 473 pedestrians killed, and 37 of them were under the age of 15. I can't tell you the close calls I've had with just kids on the tracks. Thank God I never hit one. But again, they told us at engineer school, you will not finish your career without hitting at least one car and maybe killing one person. You are 30 times more likely to die if a train hits you than if a car hits you. That's obvious, right? A 150-car train traveling at 30 miles an hour takes about 2/3 of a mile to stop. 4 days before Christmas, 1988, I had 6 engines and 134 cars coming from Allentown going out to Enola. As I came into Tuckerton and Temple, there's a crossing there, right at the Temple station. 4 days before Christmas, everybody's out Christmas shopping. I'm doing everything right. I'm blowing the horn. The flashes are going. And as we're approaching the crossing, one car went across, another car went across, and a third car followed them in a Chevette. She was a 67-year-old grandmother who lived right near there in a Chevette. She died instantly. Through an emergency, which means you put the brakes on full. It was a good half a mile till I got stopped. She died instantly for nothing. It's sad. This happens a lot in this country. And I want to show you a movie here in the time we have left. It's about 10 minutes. For some reason, this thing won't play the sound. No surprise. So I'll just have to talk you through it. We made this a good many years ago off VHS tapes. That's up at Mountaintop near Wilkes-Barre. They were doing a test. Here's what the conductor sees. I wish there was sound to this because there's all kinds of narration on this, but that's okay. Everybody see okay? Not blocking anybody? Excuse me. That's a small train, only a handful of cars. He's just pointing out how the whole interior is crushed. These were invented by the Reading Company, by the way. Stop, look, and listen, the old ones used to say. I can say without exaggerating, there probably wasn't a trip I ran where somebody didn't come out in front of you and you wonder if they're going to keep going or not. That's every engineer. This lady stuck on the tracks. She got out.
Some people don't realize it.
That's exactly right. That's the point. This is a test out in Harrisburg, outside of Harrisburg, with a crash test dummy. No, I'm sorry. This is Florida East Coast. I'm getting ahead of myself. Every now and then they do these tests to show you what happens. Here's a test with a school bus. In my career, I've turned in probably 8 different school buses for stopping right in front of me on the tracks. Went to court over one for doing things like that. I was just trying to tell you how big these trains are and how it's so hard to miss them, but people run all the time. This is outside of Harrisburg with a crash test dummy. When they download the data, they'll show you how hard that person got hit against the side window. They'll tell you no seatbelt, no airbag will save you, something like that. "19 tons. That dummy gets smashed against the other side of the car." This is out in Chicago, Chicago Metro. Engineer named Mike Byers. He's just talking how crazy it is. People run out in front of him all the time. We showed this video to the Schuylkill Haven High School driver ed class. And I said to the teacher, "Of course, you talk about this, don't you?" He goes, "No, we never talk about trains." Watch this. Taking off the gates, going around the gates. I'm sorry there's no sound. We tested this out on 2 different TVs and it worked fine. Why it's not working here, I don't know. They're trying to show you how big trains are. They can be deceptive because they're so big. Because that's so big, it looks like it's not moving, but it's actually coming at you at about 200 miles an hour. That's his point. Trains are so big, you tend to think they're not going as fast as they are. That train's moving about 30, he says. Doesn't look like it's moving. I think this one's doing 10, that one's doing 30. This is my railroad, Canadian Pacific. They did this test up in Canada. They destroyed 3 brand new trucks. They tell you on one of these, a 10,000-ton freight train hitting a 2,000-ton car is like your car running over a soda can. It's the same weight ratio. No contest. That lady's stuck on the tracks. Yeah. See the body laying here? Body bag. This some rail fan caught on camera. I did that very thing once in New Ringo. I cut a tractor trailer almost in half. I don't think they lived. This is in Florida, Amtrak. This was a famous collision. He's doing 79 miles an hour and hits a loaded gasoline truck. Every engineer's nightmare. He tells how he dove to the floor and prayed that he wouldn't die, and the truck exploded, and he lived, but a whole bunch of people got incinerated at the crossing. If anybody wants, I'll make a copy of this. You can take it home, maybe hear all this. It's interesting. Sorry you can't hear the sound. Here's a reenactment, computer animation. He says there were people in their cars still holding onto their steering wheel, incinerated by the fireball. When I showed this to the school, I told them this is going to be a little disturbing. This you're going to see here in a second. This is Elmhurst, Illinois, right outside of Bensonville Yard. She goes back. These two don't. Stop. That little girl was killed instantly. It's sad. It's really sad. Any questions? Any comments?
You have many instances with, little boys getting.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. We had an incident just north of Schuylkill Haven going up towards Pottsville. Guys had a four-wheeler out and they tried to cross the tracks and they bellied out. Pick up the bend with a train. There they sit and they're trying to get this. We didn't hit them, but we think, yeah, that happens. Dumb stuff. Sure.
I used to work by the yard in Harrisburg,
Yeah,
which is really huge. And
it is.
they would have the cars there with the tractor trailer, the reefer cars.
Yeah.
And they would, who's responsible for making sure there's fuel to power the generator?
Well, when they leave the yard, those trains are made up. There are car inspectors who check every car. There are special guys who make sure those things have enough fuel to get wherever they're going.
That was one of the.
Yeah.
They're all day long.
I know when I worked in Binghamton, those trains would come in with those refrigerator cars, and they'd send the car inspectors out to make sure that they're still running. Because if they shut down, you're in trouble. You got to start them again. Anybody else?
They follow them with GPS now.
Yeah, you're right, they do.
Everything.
Yeah, in my day, they didn't. And now they know right on
Satellite
the,
in the sky tells them everything.
yeah, you're right, they do, you're right.
About this electronic,
Electronic brakes?
yeah, that they were talking about that car, straight out of Palestine.
Yeah,
Would have had it.
no, that's a joke.
I heard that.
That's not
They did
true.
away with that.
It's not true. They,
Electronic brakes, they did away.
yeah, they tested those, they tried them. That figure I gave you of all the, how many hundreds of thousands of freight cars, it would take 30, 40 years to get them all backfitted with electric brakes, and it wouldn't have saved that train anyway, because an axle burned off.
That's what I was told.
Yeah, they were in the process of stopping when,
The biggest thing the FRA said they've been stealing the copper wire off the cars. Just like in-
yeah.
They couldn't afford to do it, nowhere around the country. They afford it.
By the way, folks, this is Bob Malay. I think you worked in the railroad probably longer than I did. Yeah, yeah, we worked together out of Allentown, yeah.
I was always curious about the tankers between, if you're going to work red.
Yeah,
One else in my.
they're stored. They're tankers for fracking. And because fracking in Pennsylvania is almost shut down, they store them. So the local railroad here, the Reading Northern, gets what, $10 a day or something to store those? They're everywhere. Yeah, they store them all. Yep. Let me give you one quick story to show you how weird this gets about a grade crossing accident. We were running light engines, just engines coming down from Tamaqua to Port Clinton. And we're late. We got like 20 minutes to get there before we run out of time. So we're going pretty long. Right above Dreyersville, there's the river, a guy's house, a little crossing, and the mountain. We come down around the bend and there's cars parked everywhere. And there's one car parked, you know where that crossing is, right? One car parked right up on the tracks. They're having a party. So we take the whole side off this little car and come to a stop. Look around and there's no lights on. Everybody's wearing togas, walking around with red cups full, I guess, booze. It was a toga party. They're all holding candles. So as soon as I stop, they all come up on the engine to see what's going on. You know, this is no lie. Out of the house comes this guy. I guess he was the guy who lived there with a top hat, a coat with tails, and a big alarm clock, and everything was gold. He goes over to the engine with a cup in his hand. Hey, dudes, come on down. We're having a party. You know, I said, no, we got to go. So up on the engine comes this young guy with John Lennon glasses, you know, like this. And he goes, whoa, dude, you hit my car, man. What are we going to do about this? I said, well, I guess you got to get in the radio and call the cops. And he all go, no cops, no cops, you know. He just pulled off the tracks and we boogied for Port Clinton, never heard any more about it. You see some weird stuff. That could have been a lot worse, though, had they been standing on the track. You might have hit them. Any other questions or comments? I really apologize. I don't know why you couldn't hear this and why my slides are all out of order, but you get the idea, I guess.
I remember when I was a kid, my dad taking me out of St. Clair and watching the train from the roundhouse.
I'd love to have seen that.
That was pretty cool.
St. Clair had to be a cool place to hang out. Yeah, I'd love to have seen
I
that.
remember when Steve did a gas truck here in Fort Collins.
Yes, that was in the paper. I have pictures of that. He was backing down from Tamaqua. Yeah. There's theories that guy was trying to commit suicide. I don't know if it's true, but he stopped this gasoline truck right on the railroad track and the steam engine went right into him. Yeah, I have pictures of that from an old newspaper clip.
They brought the cars over here to the Boston station.
Oh, really?
Wagon car and the mail car.
Yeah.
Because they kept it here because they found out what was in the mail car.
Yeah,
I remember
that was something. Anybody else? Yeah.
Or run, you're away from home for days at a time.
Oh, yeah. They put you in a hotel.
You don't have to train there.
Yeah, I spent many nights in a hotel. You did too. It's just part of the railroad. You leave, like when I worked for CP, I'd leave Binghamton, go north to Albany. They put you in a hotel overnight. Next morning, you go back out, Binghamton train back. Go home for a day, day and a half, and do it again. Round and round and round and round. For many, many years. That's just what they did. Usually they're pretty nice hotels. Not always, but usually they're not too bad.
My dad lived in Frankfurt years ago. Oh, but what they used to do is they would hop the train in Frankfurt and ride it all the way down to St. Clair.
Yeah.
And then catch the next one coming back. One of his friends, they were halfway down to St. Clair. He fell off the car.
Mm.